We're about to get started. If everyone can, it's great to see all the conversation. So we want to kick off. So thank you all so much for coming today. It's great to see all of you and to be hosting here at MSCI and to be working with our partners at CECP. I'm Beth Byington. I head our ESG and climate corporate solutions at MSCI. So we work with companies who are integrating sustainability into their corporate strategies and using our research and solutions to engage the investment community on ESG and climate. I'm sure, like many of you, I find this week exhilarating, Climate Week. There's so much optimism and energy and excitement about climate action, but it's also a reminder of how much work still needs to be done. And a lot of that work being borne on the shoulders of corporate leaders, right, who are at the center of the transition. Implementing change management, making a lot of difficult decisions about how to achieve net zero targets and decarbonization goals, and implementing new ways of thinking and operating within their organization to achieve those goals. And so that's what brought us to pick the topic we have for today, which is called Bridging the Gap Between the CSO and the Board, because we really wanted to dig into what are some tangible steps that companies are taking to implement change, to weave climate considerations into what they do, and specifically from a governance perspective, what sorts of governance structures or approaches are they instituting to really hold leaders to account and to make sure they're on track. So knowing the panel we have today, we're going to hear some great tips and lessons learned. Before I turn it to the panel, I just want to introduce our moderator, Carolina. Carolina is a director of corporate insights and advisory at CECP. And she herself is a seasoned ESG executive. She's worked with boards and companies, CEOs for many years. Most recently, before joining CECP earlier this year, she worked as a board advisor, or board observer, I should say, and a senior advisor at A10 Invest, which is a leading private equity firm focused on climate change. She's been an ESG practitioner, a researcher, a thought leader, so no one better to moderate today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carolina.
Thank you, Beth. That's an honor. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming early this morning. With that said, I would like to introduce you to CCP. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with CCP. Everybody is? Thank you. It was CCP was started by Paul Newman, and as you might know, 230 affiliates, roughly representing $7 trillion in assets under management. We're very proud to be a partner with MSCI. I'm very proud to be here. And no further ado, I would love the panelists to introduce each one of themselves, starting with Gilles.
I'm Gilles Vermot from a French company, Schneider Electric. And I take care of sustainability and now citizenship. I will explain why we shift with this word for 25 years. And I'm the holder here.
Wow, that's impressive. Good morning, everyone. Is this on?
I'm French, but I know.
Oh, leave it to SE to know the technology. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to MSCI. I'm Tia Counts. I'm the Chief Responsibility and Diversity Officer for MSCI. I look after sustainability across the E, the S, and the G, and I'm delighted to be here this morning.
Is this on? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to MSCI and CECP for hosting, for my fellow panelists being up here, and for all of you making it to Thursday of Climate Week and still coming to an event. So nice job and thank you. Matthew Slovik, I lead Morgan Stanley's Global Sustainable Finance Group. We work across the firm to help our businesses and clients develop solutions that relate to sustainability, both environmental and social. And I'm excited to be here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandy Nessing, and Chief Sustainability Officer at American Electric Power, one of the largest utilities in the U.S. And I've been in the utility space for over 26 years and leading sustainability at AEP for almost 18 of those years. So I look forward to this conversation today. I interact with our board, but I'm also chair of a board and serve on other boards as well. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. With that in mind, my first question is to Tia. And how do you see the role of sustainability leader evolving in terms of engaging with financial aspects and decision-making within the organization?
Thank you for that first question. Do I have to turn it on each time? Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, great. So this is a really exciting one for me because anyone who's been in this space for a while knows that sustainability used to be historically really more about storytelling. And the Chief Sustainability Officer was a person who told a nice story about corporate citizenship and doing the right thing. And it was, many of them evolved from CSR roles. That was then, and this is now. So the exciting times that we're in now, Chief Sustainability Officers are really involved in integrating corporate strategy throughout the company, integrating sustainability, throughout the corporate strategy. And what that looks like for many of us, which is exciting and thrilling, is you're no longer, you do need to tell a story. You're still a storyteller, right? You're still weaving the truth together and making sure it's comprehensible, both to the board as well as to your employees and investors. But now you're actually involved at the table with setting strategy, and that involves talking to the board regularly. I report to our board quarterly on our sustainability initiatives. That means that they get to keep me honest and I get to help them understand what that means for our company. We set the context for the board. We help them understand what's the outside world doing, what's the outside in, how are we measuring ourselves, how do we stack up compared to our peers, how do we stack up compared to what we said we were going to do, right? The board will keep me honest on that. We also look to influence the senior leadership team. So again, Chief Sustainability Officers were just not in those conversations before. And today, we very much are a part of bringing together the senior leadership team, bringing them along on the journey, tapping their expertise, ensuring that they are aware of the strategy as we want to see it evolve and that they're all taking their part. And then the final point I would make is that the Chief Sustainability Officer in today's world is involved in engaging investors. And that's a really important part of the conversation because our investors care very much about sustainability. They're asking us for certain changes. They're asking us for a certain amount of transparency. And that engagement and that dialogue that is ongoing is super critical. At MSCI, I meet with our top investors annually at our annual Corporate Responsibility Roadshow, where they have a chance to ask me any question, no questions too large or too small, about our sustainability initiatives, about how we're benchmarking ourselves, about how we're walking the talk, which we love to do because MSCI, sustainability is part of our DNA. So we really do need to walk the talk, both in terms of reporting and transparency, as well as in terms of taking a leadership position wherever we can in climate. So it's a very different conversation than it used to be, and the CSO's role in that conversation is evolving and becoming much more nuanced in line with the complexity of the evolving conversation about sustainability. And I think I'll leave it there.
Fantastic, thank you. And Matt, a second question to you. Could you share a successful example of how we have collaborated to integrate sustainability goals into financial strategies? Please.
Sure, thank you. Our team largely functions as a strategy team, I guess you could say, across Morgan Stanley, so everything we do has to be collaborative. So whether that is partnering with our business units, where we've helped build our green bond practice going back over a decade now, back when the green bond or sustainability bond market wasn't what it is today. I think about partnering with our private equity team to build an impact private equity capability that today is very active across climate solutions as well as social impact. Or I think about our path to net zero that literally touches our businesses, where we work very closely with our clients on helping them transition, our risk management team around climate risk, our finance team around disclosures. All of these, I think, have really demonstrated the need to collaborate in order to actually integrate sustainability into how we function and how we deliver advice and solutions to our clients to ultimately help them execute against their vision as well.
Fantastic. That was wonderful. And Sandy, what strategies have you employed to ensure ongoing communications and collaboration between the sustainability team and the board? And how do you maintain an open dialogue?
I'm very fortunate that we have a very ESG and sustainability savvy board at AEP. It wasn't always like that, but it is today. There are protocols when you're in a company of how you engage with the board of directors, but I do report to our governance committee at least twice a year. And while it's an update on our activities, it usually is more of a conversation on current activities or trends or emerging issues and things that we need to have on the radar screen. I actually just met with them on Tuesday, so I couldn't get to New York until Tuesday afternoon, meeting with the governance committee, and they were pretty focused on anti-ESG. My company is in 11 states. 10 of them are deeply red, and so it's a real challenge for us. But they're interested in how we talk about things. They're also very interested in our ESG profile, and they look at, we provide a dashboard for them to see, how we're doing. We always tell them we're not chasing an A or 1 or, the top score. What we want is solid, and that it is something that investors, bankers, credit rating agencies can have assurance that we are doing what we say we're doing. So from that perspective, there is good conversation with them. They'll reach out to me whenever they've got a question as well. So they review our sustainability report every year. The governance committee does. And I always have one-off conversations with them on very specific things because they read it cover to cover. And word by word at times too. And then I'm also involved with the lead director in preparing her for her annual governance outreach, which is fabulous. And then I get to sit in on those calls with her as she's talking with our largest institutional investors as one of her advisors. So a really great relationship with our board. Now I also, as I mentioned, sit on a company board, but I also chair a pretty large nonprofit in Columbus, Ohio. And that's a different perspective, right? So, with the board that I sit on, the company board, I even with the nonprofit, I always know that I'm there not to run the day-to-day operations. I am there as an advisor, counsel, fiduciary. That I have a very different role as a board member. But again, really good conversations, really good communication with the leadership, both the CEO at the Botanical Garden that I chair, and also the tech company where I'm a board member there, which is great. And I get to talk about the product with the product development team, and so there are different roles that you play depending on which side you're on, but it's rewarding all the way around.
Fantastic, thank you. That's a really good perspective. And now my next question is to Gilles. He brings an amazing perspective from Europe. I don't know if you want to answer her question as well. And in addition to, how does effective governance play a role in ensuring accurate and transparent climate and sustainability reporting, as well as what are some pitfalls if governance is lacking?
Yes, thank you. You could have a lot of information in the report of Schneider Electric. You can transfer. It's very precise to express the governance to manage sustainability in Schneider in 5 pages. The discussion is very interesting for me because I'm an actor in a company, and each time, and for 25 years. Just close to what you expressed, but certainly a little different. I remember very well in 2000, when I was nominated a Chief Sustainability Officer, my friends, some of the people asked me, sustainability, what is it? Sustainability, it's only for the public sector, not in a company. Why do you use this word? It was very, very interesting. And now I'm Chief Citizenship Officer. It's very good. It's the same thing. And for me, I'm younger because I have the same question 20 years after with this new word. I will explain that, first thing. Second thing, in Schneider Electric, about sustainability, the journey is just amazing. Because I had a discussion with some of you just before. Today, the purpose of Schneider Electric is to support companies to become net zero emission. It was not the case 20 years ago. 2 centuries ago, Schneider was a company for steel. 20 years ago, Schneider was one of the leaders to sell electrical distribution component, automation for plants. Never we were with the vision that the topic of sustainability, the topic of management of the energy, not only to reduce the build, but to reduce the carbon emission, to change totally the vision that we have to produce energy, the dialogue between offer and demand will become the center of the offer of Schneider Electric. It's why 20 years ago, I don't think that I was the cherry on the cake. I'm not sure that I'm a good guy for storytelling, but from the beginning to now, I can see 2 or 3 things about the topic and about the governance. For me, sustainability, it's not a question of compliance, it's a question of risk. If you would like to be in the Sustainability Champions League, and Schneider Electric in this journey was from nothing to the most sustainable company by another actor than MSCI, and very often with a lot of recognition by MSCI. To be in this journey and to embark the people and the company, the first element is not the unique element, but the first element is the captain. Because when we speak about risk, if the CEO or the chairman of CEO of the company is not in this feeling, not in this vision, and only to say, okay, we have to answer to a lot of survey, a lot of questions about, never we will have this journey. We are in this position in Schneider Electric because Henri Lachmann, more with a social vision, and Jean-Pascal Tricoire with an environmental vision, decided to change the strategy of the company and to organize the responsibility inside around this topic, and to consider that because that is a trend, it's better to be with the wave than to try to stop that and to express, okay, we can do that tomorrow. In fact, if I have a second advice about how Schneider Electric manage sustainability, in ESG and in sustainability as a strategy, and for us it's the same thing, it's to be just before that something becomes mainstream. The unique gap that you obtain to be at the top level is to do the things before that is an obligation or regulatory, and before the others. Not long time before, because you are in the middle of nowhere, but just before. And for that we need to think, and we need to be committed. I remember very well the beginning, and I will stop just after, the beginning of sustainability in Schneider Electric. For many of my colleagues, today some are in this same line. It's not possible to say we are 150,000 people in a company and we are all with the same vision about the world, the people, the reality. We are everywhere around the world. It's impossible. But at the beginning, my manner to implement sustainability was very simple. And the board was active from the beginning to now, differently. Now we have a very organized structure, a specific committee, a stakeholder committee, But at the beginning, someone in the board was nominated to be my partner, to be active with me to implement sustainability in Schneider Electric. And when I had meetings with many of my colleagues, the EVP in charge of HR, supply chain, purchasing, many other topics, I asked Cathy Kopp, she was HR in a big, large company, Accor, to be in the meeting with me. And in fact, never managers and leaders in a company have meetings with board members. It's not an habit. Sometimes ExCom. We have meeting, ExCom, board together, but not to have a board person in a meeting internally to discuss about a topic. And when I asked Cathy to be in the meeting, and I sent to my colleague, oh, you know, we will discuss together about sustainability in supply chain, but just I have to express that Cathy Kopp from the board of Schneider Electric will be involved in the discussion and with us. You can see that the progress was terrific because in the same time, in 1 hour, my colleagues understand that it's not only a topic to play. His answer to organize how sustainability can transform each function in Schneider Electric was a little different because he considers that in the board someone can say, oh, you know, the guy in charge of that is able to do that. And it's why board play in Schneider Electric in these 25 years a very big role about sustainability. And why today I'm Chief Citizenship Officer. It's a consequence of some discussion with the board of Schneider Electric, with people with a lot of different point of view. You know, when we are speaking about sustainability today, the unique answer is carbon. It's key that is the topic of the century. And it's key that is the business of Schneider. And we will be very happy to support this building to become net zero emission, and that is our job. But the vision of Schneider Electric, it's, if we speak only carbon, we lose the fact that all the transitions are human transition. And when I use the word citizenship, and it was a discussion with the board, in order to encompass all the topics linked to ESG, sustainability, impact, and so on, when I use the word citizenship, sure, you have to speak about people too, and not only about carbon. It's why I agree with that. Board is governance and board. It's key when we would like to progress, especially to be in Sustainability Champions League. In this case, we need to risk not only to follow regulation and compliance.
C'est bon, merci. Yeah, no, I agree 100% too. In my experience, I've seen the journey has evolved significantly. And 20 years ago, the questions would be, what is sustainability? And then the answer would be, well, let's first agree on a definition. That way we can start talking about reporting and talk about initiatives and budgeting and things that can actually be done, or things that are just aspirational, right? And with that in mind, I'll ask my next questions to Tia, as well as the panel. How can sustainability leaders ensure that their sustainability proposals and initiatives are presented in a way that resonates with the board, in your experience?
Thank you. So it's very hard to follow a Frenchman because I'm American and I'm from California, so I'm brief. It's gonna feel really brief. Just kidding. So that question, I love that question though, because it gives me the chance to drop one of my favorite things, which is something you can take away and write down and remember. The ABCs. The ABCs of resonating with your board. Number one, the A, is make it accessible. Many of you in this room are familiar with the alphabet soup of regulation that we're all swimming in, right? I'm hearing some nods, I'm hearing some, yeah. It's overwhelming. I'm a lawyer by training and it overwhelms me. It's just too much. So your board does not need the alphabet soup. Number one, accessibility. Help the board understand what matters for your industry, what matters for your particular company, and what you're focusing on, and clear the noise, right? I used to say separate the nonsense from the noise. They don't need it. Make it clear, make it accessible. Break down what's important, and it goes by your industry, then your particular company. That's really important. The B of ABCs. Chief Sustainability Officer, Sandy will know this, are pivotal players in a team sport. What does that mean? It means that there are so many other people involved who know more than you about everything that's going on in sustainability. Those are the rest of your team. Those are the experts. Sometimes you need an SME, a subject matter expert. I hate doing acronyms, so I'll spell that out. Internal person who knows more than you about how carbon emissions are actually calculated. That's great. Bring that person sometimes when it's important for the board, that they want extra insights that you don't have in your head where all the alphabet is swimming. Bring that person into the conversation and help them explain to the board something pivotal, something important that you know is an important piece of the puzzle that they would like to understand because they asked you for it, right? My board are always asking me, let's talk about what Tia wants to talk about, but let's also talk about what we want to talk about. And sometimes it's a random question that they just find interesting. And I'm not afraid to bring in an expert where I need one. So bring people in. That person may be external, usually not, but sometimes they can be. And then the C of the ABCs is context. I think Sandy also mentioned this earlier. Your board needs to understand what is the context with which you're having this conversation. What's happening? Gilles mentioned earlier that we're always talking about carbon. It's climate week. We can, we will. Remember, everybody? But we also need the context. Sometimes the context is around human capital management. I had my most recent meeting with my board in July, early in July, just after the SCOTUS decision on affirmative action. Guess what I started the meeting with? This is the context. This is the world we're living in. This is what the US Supreme Court has just done. So I think it's really important. That applies across the board to the E, the S, and the G. When you're speaking with your board, to make things resonate, right? Make it accessible. Bring in the experts if you need help on your A team, and set the context.
And short.
And that's short. I'm done.
Thank you. Any other comments on the questions, suggestions?
I just would say that's spot on, right? I mean, that's exactly what we do. We're influencers as well. We build business cases, we do the benchmarking, we do the homework so that it can be accessible and we can break it down so they understand why. And I'll share a story. This actually happened early on during my days at AEP. We were collecting water data from all of our power plants. And I had an engineer at one of the plants call me one day, and it was for GRI. That's what we were collecting the data for. And he said, look, my job is keeping the lights on, working safely, power production. He rattled off his priorities. And he said, where does this fit in? Why do you need this data? And so we had the conversation about, I brought the investor perspective into it, and I said, you're a longtime employee of AEP, which means that you're a shareholder, so you have an investment in this company as much as all the other investors do, and they're asking us how we're managing water because we're in a water-intensive industry. Not so much anymore now that we've retired so much coal, but still use a lot of water. And when I put it in terms that he could understand, and we just had a really great conversation. He was like, okay, no problem. And that was it. That's all he needed, was to understand, the basics of why that information was important to the company when he had so many other things to do to keep that plant running that day. So it really does matter. And to your point, I know a little bit about everything, but I'm not an expert at anything. And so I always bring my SMEs in. And that's really important to do. And it gives them visibility too, which I think is really important. And when you're trying to build consensus for something, for setting new goals, you need to have that buy-in across the organization. So you have to be able to work across the enterprise. And I know that I've spoken to a few people here already, and our teams are very small. My team is 4 people working across 11 states, 18,000 employees. Not big compared to some of your companies, but big nonetheless. And we have to be able to understand what the engineers are saying and break that down so that you can understand that and what that means. Because we're a company of engineers and accountants and lawyers. And so they don't speak English. So it goes back to that storytelling and being able to connect the dots and really tell that bigger story in a way that people understand.
And maybe just to add, I liked your ABCs a lot. And I guess it's part of accessibility and context, but also remembering that board members are rarely solely experts in sustainability. And so figuring out how to make it relevant and to frame it in a way that is easy to understand, it's accessible, I think is paramount. Boards have to worry about so many things from a governance perspective that figuring out how to really fit this into the framing of what's important for your industry, your company, and to make it easily understandable is really important.
And if I may, short, we have board member and board member. Because the vision in general is, okay, you have a board, you have the company, someone or a team in charge of sustainability, and you have to embark the board in this journey. Yes, but before you have to choose the board member. Each year in a company you change 1 or 2 board members. And in fact, this topic is so important. I remember very well discussion with Jean-Pascal Tricoire about different profile for the new board member. And the challenge is here in the first time. Not only to have a board member without any understanding of sustainability and try during the board session to train these people to make sensitive. We have to recruit people, if we would like to progress in sustainability, who are sensitive at the beginning of sustainability. Not all the board members, but it's very important. I express that I have a vision of 25 years in Schneider Electric. The board members today are very different than at the beginning, but because Schneider Electric wants to be in a position to organize its future around the topic of sustainability, when we choose the board member, we need to have that at the beginning, and not only to consider that it's not a question and we will have the question after. And certainly, when you ask a company about sustainability, that could be interesting to have a question, and so many questions.
Oui.
To have a question, why do you choose this 1, 2, or 3 new board members in front of the topic of responsibility, impact on sustainability? I think it's the question if it's at the beginning. And the second thing, it's to be clear with the people in the company. Very often I say, with all the stakeholders of Schneider Electric, the most complex people to embark in the things that we would like to do are the employees, not the in Schneider Electric job, not the NGOs, not the civil society, investors or some other. It's the employees because they have a clear vision of the company, the difference between the storytelling and the reality, the progress plan. In Schneider Electric, we have decided to have a balanced scorecard each 5 years with 11 components. And with this balanced scorecard, with the board, we decide that 100 million euro of compensation, variable compensation of Schneider Electric, from the CEO to the 60,000 leaders, are linked to the results of this balanced scorecard. It's very simple. The tools, 5 years to progress, each year the level of the performance, variable compensation, 100 million euros, from the boss to all the manager of Schneider Electric, with a decision from the board. It's simple, in fact.
Oui, absolutely. And with that in mind, I would say, could you share any instances where collaboration between sustainability leadership and the board resulted in solutions that benefited sustainability goals or the organization's financial health? I believe, Matt, can I put you on the spot?
Well, thank you for that question. Look, I think our board oversight is incredibly important. And just as an indication of that, you were talking about the evolution of the board members, and actually in the past year we renamed one of our board committees to the Sustainability and Governance Committee to really formalize it. Right, since the beginning we've had board oversight in this role, but it's I think really putting it into place. And I think we've tried to think a lot about sustainability governance across the firm, which I think is relevant for board governance. And we've put into place, and you can read about it in our sustainability report, our overall sort of governance structure across our businesses and the various geographies where we operate. We also, and maybe I'll just pick one specific spot around disclosure, because I'm trying to think, maybe 7 years ago, we actually started to put into place the processes around our sustainability disclosure that mimicked what we were doing for our financial disclosure around our 10K, with the idea that if you build in if you build in the processes, the internal stakeholder engagement, that you can build, that this was very important as more and more investors, stakeholders were relying on the data, and the story, right? The transition from storytelling to investor relevant disclosure. And I think that comes from the top. It comes from the board. It comes from our senior management. This focus on making sure that we build in the right governance processes has been key to our evolving evolution as well.
Can I just add on to that
Please.
really quickly? So I think that's extraordinary, Matt. And we did as well recently, a few years ago, renamed our governance committee to the Corporate Responsibility and Governance Committee for that same reason, to really underscore the importance of this work. But I just want to echo your point on process, right? Because one of the fundamental pillars of good disclosure is disclosure that you can stand behind, that you know is as robust and has gone through the same process for both the collection of the data, the validation of the data, before you're putting it out in the world, as you would with any other piece of financial disclosure. So like your company, we're also really underscoring that discipline even before it's technically required. So it's something that I think a lot of companies would do well to get ahead of. We all know it's coming, back to the alphabet soup. We know it's coming. They may be in draft form, but we might as well get ready for it now.
Yeah, I totally agree. About 6 or 7 years ago, never let a red audit go to waste. So we got a red audit on our sustainability report. I'm like, oh my God, and everybody ran around with their hair on fire, which, and the problem was that the ownership was directed at me, and it really needed to be embedded in the organization. And so to change that, we worked with some of our subject matter experts around the company and developed standard work. So that ensures business continuity, but it also ensures there's a standard way that we're going to collect this data, how we're going to report it, where it's going to be stored, and how we're going to tell that story. And it's got to feed into the internal audit at the end of the line. Our audit team was a great partner with us in putting that together. We do training every year because now we're seeing a lot of turnover in our project managers. This is all new to them, but they're able to pick up that standard work and go with it, and they understand. We collect support documentation, so when we were putting the standard work together, we also worked with the 10K team, the financial reporting team, to do the same thing. Let's try to mirror what they're doing, and that's how we started to collect support documentation for every data point that we collect. And we have an online ESG data center that has over 250 metrics in it, and all of those are audited by our internal audit team. I also want to just quickly touch on the accountability piece, because I think that is so incredibly important, and that is part of what we did when we put the standard work together. We created an accountability structure that starts with the content providers, working with my team, and it goes all the way up to our Enterprise Sustainability Council, who has to sign off on the reporting and the disclosures before it goes to the executive leadership team, who then has to review it before it goes to the board. So it's a great process in place, and because of ESG being so prominent, we also created a corporate ESG committee that is cross-functional. It's an internal committee, but that helps us feed up to the board as well. And then this year just created a climate change executive group. So now there's real direct line all the way up, and climate is embedded within that now. So accountability, governance, super important in the company as much as it is at the board level.
Brilliant, Sandy. That's great advice. So ABCs of how to talk to the board, financial health, technical expertise, bring in the engineers, maybe an army of engineers, depending on your sector. If it's hard to abate, I suggest an army of engineers. Better, the more the better. And brilliant advice, thank you. That's so true. Like, you saw the red and then you dig right through it. That's great. And with that in mind, I would say, how does governance structure within an organization influence your ability to implement and oversee sustainability initiatives, Gilles? Do you like to start that one?
Yes. During this discussion, I had a new question. We are in 2023, and we have this question, and we see what's happened in the last 20 years. And I would be very interested to the answer about this question, bridging the gap between the CSO and the board. What could be the reality in 20 years when we see where we are and the trend? Because I'm sure for many things, in each department in a company, the people are linked to what's happened with sustainability. If I express that when we are speaking about sustainability, ESG is not only a question of carbon, it's not to say that this question is not at the top level, it's the question of the century. My answer is to be good to answer to this question, we need to face all the ESG questions. The question of just transition, the question of the transfer of the skills in a company, because we know that we will have a scarcity of competencies, the question of human rights, because it's not possible to consider that I take care in a good manner to the climate if I don't take care to the people who are working in the supply chain for my own solutions. And I think all these topics are together. And the board of Schneider Electric is very insisting on this topic. It's not to say, okay, you are the champion with a new strategy for climate for everybody. It's enough. We don't have to take care to the other topic. No, it's totally the opposite thing. It's if you would like to continue to be at this level to tackle the topic of climate, carbon, you need to be a responsible company about everything. If you would like to attract the better employees, and in a company like Schneider Electric, we have each year between 10 to 15,000 new employees. The reputation of the company linked to sustainability is key to have the people who are interested by that, if we would like to continue to be more innovative and so on. It's why I think the CSO will be very different in the future than where we are now. We are now very happy to measure how the CSO is linked to the CEO, organize a good relationship between all the silos that we have in a company to answer to the question of sustainability. But certainly, many of the jobs will be done tomorrow directly by all the functions, and we have more or less a CSO in each department of the company. But I think we need to have someone, and that is true for the future and linked to governance too, first to open the door of the company, open the window to see what's happened, not only in the company, because very often we consider we are very good and we can discuss together to be better, but not to open the window to know in which direction we have to be better and how the people consider the company. And the second thing, for me, what is very important in my job in the middle of all the organizations that you mentioned, it's to express to my colleagues that in each daily decision, we organize the future. Because very often, it's my experience, the people say, oh yes, what you say is very important, but we have an emergency today, it's COVID, today it's scarcity of raw materials, we need to solve this problem and we will discuss with you just after. No. All the decisions are in emergency, or many of them are in emergency. Our role is to embark the future in the decisions that we have to take today. And it's not a question of reconciliation between people, profit, planet. Sustainability is not a question of reconciliation, it's a battle. And it's a battle between short term, middle, long term. It's a battle between what we are doing today and the vision that we have of the future, to embark the vision in the daily decision. I think it's my job today.
Fantastic. With that said, I believe we're going to start Q&A unless one of the panelists wants some input on the same question. Matt, maybe?
Looking at me. The only point I would add, and it's not so much about the board, is that I think we've seen a real evolution over the years as the sustainability lead has elevated to engaging with the C-suite. We spent a lot of time as an investment bank with treasurers and CFOs and CEOs across industries. When I started in this team shortly after we founded it about 13 years ago, most companies didn't have sustainability teams. Then when they did, the CFO or the treasurer didn't know that you had a sustainability team, right? They certainly
ESG came on.
And then, even 5 years ago, maybe not so dissimilar. And now we do meetings with sustainability teams and the CFO and the treasurer. That level of connectivity, I think, is incredibly important and just shows the elevation of sustainability to the C-suite and to the board as well.
Fantastic, yes. And part of the challenge too is because your sustainability team sometimes was hiding in the foundation, working with CSI, which it still is, which is wonderful. And that's where there needs to be collaboration in order to achieve results, like measurable, tangible results, right?